Luro, the pet parrot, echoed through the spacious kitchen of the mansion, breaking the morning silence. "I'm hungry! I'm hungry!" the bird repeated, with a strangely melancholic tone. Sophia, Ricardo's wife, who was finishing preparing a lavish breakfast for herself and her husband, rolled her eyes. "Luro, stop it! What's with this habit of imitating everything you hear on TV?" she grumbled, not giving it much thought. She was a woman of cold beauty, with eyes that rarely showed warmth and an ambition that surpassed any affection. Ricardo, seated at the table, was flipping through the morning newspaper, but the parrot's words made him raise an eyebrow. "It's the first time he's repeated that, isn't it?" he asked, without taking his eyes off the news, but with a hint of curiosity. "Oh, Ricardo, you know how he is. He must have heard some cooking show or something," Sophia replied, with a forced smile. She placed a platter of scrambled eggs and bacon on the table, followed by fresh bread and various fruits. For her father-in-law, Mr. Alfredo, she had already prepared a simple dish, a small portion of thin porridge and a slice of dry bread. While Ricardo served himself, Sophia picked up a bowl of fresh fruit and, with a quick and surreptitious movement, threw a considerable portion into the trash before covering the container with a napkin. Luro, perched on his stand in the adjacent living room, watched everything with his bright eyes. "I'm hungry," Luro repeated, this time with more intensity, almost like a lament. Ricardo finally lowered his newspaper, his gaze fixed on the bird. There was something in the repetition, in the insistence that bothered him. "He's strange today," he commented more to himself. Sophia, noticing her husband's discomfort, hastened to divert attention. "Nonsense, dear. I have to take your father's breakfast. He must be waiting." She picked up the tray with the porridge and dry bread and headed towards the oldest wing of the mansion, where Mr. Alfredo lived in seclusion. Ricardo tried to ignore the uneasy feeling, but the parrot's words seemed to have lodged in his mind. Throughout the day, while working in his office, thoughts of Luro and his strange behavior haunted him. He found himself remembering his father's fragile appearance, how he seemed to have shrunk in recent months, the quietude that had become his trademark. In the late afternoon, Ricardo went down to the living room, seeking a moment of relaxation. Sophia was on the phone, talking animatedly about a charity event. Luro, who was usually calmer at that hour, started again. "I'm hungry. Didn't eat today. I'm hungry." The phrases followed one another, now with a new addition that made Ricardo's blood run cold. "Didn't eat today." He turned sharply to the parrot. The voice was not Sophia's, nor that of any TV show. It was a hoarse, weak voice that he recognized with a chilling shock, his father's voice. A shiver ran down his spine. The blind routine of his life, his unwavering trust in Sophia, everything began to crumble. The parrot's words, once just a curiosity, now sounded like a cry for help. His father, Mr. Alfredo, had always been a proud and reserved man. He would never complain openly. But Luro was the only loyal witness. Ricardo looked at Sophia, who continued her phone conversation, oblivious to the storm brewing in her husband's eyes. The image of his father, thin and silent, superimposed itself on Sophia's, so concerned with appearances. A cold anger began to simmer within him, mixed with an overwhelming guilt. How could he have been so blind, so negligent? He had entrusted the most important person in his life to the woman he now suspected was a tormentor. At that moment, Ricardo made a decision. He could no longer ignore the signs. He needed to discover the truth, no matter the cost. And for that, he would need a trap that would unmask Sophia's charade and rescue his father from isolation and hunger. The mansion, once a luxury refuge, now seemed like a prison, and he the unwitting jailer. Ricardo remained motionless, his gaze fixed on Luro, but the image projected in his mind was that of his father. The parrot's words, Didn't eat today, echoed like a macabre sound, an involuntary confession of the cruelty that he, in his blindness, had allowed to flourish under his own roof. The anger he felt was a cold fire, consuming him from within. It wasn't just anger at Sophia, but an even greater fury at himself. How could he have been so oblivious, so absorbed in his business, in his routine, that he didn't perceive the suffering of the man who had given him life? The mansion, once a symbol of his achievement and comfort, now seemed a mausoleum, a place where his father's life was slowly being drained. The luxury that surrounded him, the works of art, the expensive furniture, everything seemed to mock him, a reminder of the futility of his wealth in the face of his own father's hunger. Sophia, oblivious to the silent storm brewing over Ricardo, finally ended her call. "There, dear. I managed to confirm the details of the charity auction. It will be a success, I'm sure." She smiled, a smile that to Ricardo now seemed a well-rehearsed mask. "Charity auction," he repeated, his voice more controlled than he expected. "Of course." He forced himself to smile back, an effort that cost him every fiber of his being. He couldn't give Sophia any hint of his suspicions. He needed to be cunning, patient. The truth, he knew, was a treacherous animal, and Sophia, an experienced huntress. That night, Ricardo barely slept. Every sound in the mansion, every shadow cast by the moonlight, seemed to amplify his anguish. He mentally reviewed the last few months, trying to find the signs he had ignored. His father's weight loss, his pallor, his distant gaze. He had always attributed it to age, to the natural melancholy of old age. But now everything fit into a sinister pattern. At dawn, with eyes heavy from sleeplessness, Ricardo went down for coffee. Sophia was already in the kitchen, supervising the maid who was preparing breakfast. He observed her every move, every word. She seemed the perfect wife, the impeccable hostess. But the image of Luro, repeating his father's words, was etched in his mind. "Good morning, dear," Sophia said with her soft and melodic voice. "Did you sleep well?" "Like an angel." Ricardo lied, pouring himself coffee. He noticed that the portion of porridge for his father was already ready on a tray. It was small, almost insignificant. "I'll take your father's coffee," Sophia announced, picking up the tray. "He likes to eat early." Ricardo nodded, but his eyes followed Sophia until she disappeared down the hallway. He waited a few minutes, his heart pounding in his chest. Then, with the excuse of getting a document from his office, he headed to his father's wing. Passing by Mr. Alfredo's ajar bedroom door, Ricardo heard Sophia's voice, strangely cold. "Here it is, Alfredo. Don't complain. It's what we have for today." He couldn't hear his father's response, but Sophia's intonation was a blow. There was no affection, no concern, just a distant formality, almost veiled contempt. Ricardo quickly retreated, returning to the dining room, pretending nothing had happened. He needed irrefutable proof. A parrot's words, however convincing, would not be enough to unmask Sophia, nor for him to accept the dimension of the cruelty himself. The idea of a trap began to solidify in his mind. He needed something that would catch her red-handed, something that would leave no room for doubt or excuses. Technology, which helped him so much in his business, could be his ally. Hidden cameras. It was the only way. He would spend the day out, as usual, but this time his work would be different. He needed to acquire the equipment, plan the installation, all without raising suspicion. Sophia was intelligent, shrewd. Any false step could alert her, and then his father would be in even greater danger. That afternoon, while Sophia was at one of her charity meetings, Ricardo made a series of discreet calls. He contacted an old college colleague, now a security expert, asking for a quote for a surveillance system for the mansion, focusing on blind spots and service areas. He emphasized the need for discretion and speed. "I want something that is practically invisible," he explained to his friend, his voice low and urgent, to monitor specific areas without anyone noticing. His friend, accustomed to the eccentric requests of rich clients, asked no questions. He promised to send a technical team disguised as maintenance the next day. When Sophia would be out at a charitable event, Ricardo felt a mix of relief and dread. The trap was being set. He was about to open Pandora's box, and he didn't know what he would find inside. But one thing was certain: he could no longer live in ignorance. His father depended on him, and for the first time in a long time, Ricardo felt he was truly waking up. The parrot, Luro, with his hoarse and insistent voice, had been the herald of a terrible truth, and Ricardo was finally ready to face it. The mansion, once a sanctuary of his perfect life, was about to become the stage for a dark reckoning. Ricardo felt the weight of that crushing truth. The calls had been made, the arrangements discreetly sealed. His friend, a discreet and efficient professional, had promised that the team would be there the next morning, under the pretext of a routine security system review. The excuse was perfect, convincing enough for Sophia, who always valued impeccable maintenance of the property. That night, Ricardo's sleep was even more fragmented. He tossed and turned in bed, his mind in a whirlwind. The image of his father, fragile and silent, mixed with Luro's hoarse voice, repeating, "Didn't eat today." Every tick-tock of the clock on the bedside table seemed a countdown to the revelation of a truth he feared and longed for at the same time. Guilt was a heavy burden, but the determination to act was even stronger. He could no longer be the blind man, the complacent husband. At dawn, the tension in the air was almost palpable, at least for Ricardo. Sophia, however, seemed radiant. "Good morning, dear. Auction day has arrived. I'm sure we'll raise a fortune for the cause," she hummed as she got ready in an elegant dress and discreet jewelry. Her enthusiasm was a stark contrast to Ricardo's silent anguish, who could barely swallow his coffee. "That's good, Sophia," he managed to reply, forcing a smile that barely reached his eyes. "I'm sure it will." While they had breakfast, Ricardo observed Sophia with a new lens. Every movement, every word was analyzed. She picked up the tray with the thin porridge and dry bread for Mr. Alfredo, as usual. "I'll take your father's coffee. I don't want him to miss his medication time," she said, with a false concern that now sounded hollow to Ricardo's ears. He watched her disappear down the hallway, and a knot formed in his stomach. Shortly after, Sophia said goodbye, promising to return only in the late afternoon, after the event and the gala dinner. "The security technicians will come for a review. Let them do their work, dear. It's important," she instructed, unaware that she was, in fact, facilitating her own trap. As soon as Sophia's car left the property, Ricardo felt a mix of relief and adrenaline. He called his friend, confirming that the team was on its way. In less than an hour, a discreet van pulled up in front of the mansion. Two men dressed in generic security company uniforms entered carrying tool cases. "Mr. Ricardo, everything's ready," said the team leader, a middle-aged man with glasses. "Where would you like us to start?" Ricardo led them to his office, where he had prepared a map of the mansion. "I need discreet, almost invisible cameras. Main focus on the kitchen, the adjacent service area, the hallway leading to my father's room, and if possible, one in his room itself, camouflaged in some object." He pointed to the strategic locations. "I want audio monitoring too. And please, everything must be remotely accessible with continuous recording." The technicians nodded, professional and efficient. They worked with impressive discretion, installing micro-cameras in smoke detectors, in a small potted plant in the kitchen, in a picture frame in the hallway, and in Mr. Alfredo's room, in a wall clock that Ricardo had brought there, claiming it was a gift. While the team worked, Ricardo sat in his office, his heart pounding. With each passing hour, the surveillance network became more complete. By noon, the technicians had finished. Everything configured, sir. You can access the images and audio from any of these points, through this tablet and your cell phone. The recordings are stored on a secure server. Ricardo picked up the tablet, his hands slightly trembling. The screen lit up, showing live images of the different rooms. The kitchen, empty. The hallway, silent. His father's room, where Mr. Alfredo slept, oblivious to the surveillance that now surrounded him. Excellent. Thank you very much for the discretion and speed, Ricardo said, paying them generously. With the team's departure, the mansion plunged into a heavy silence. Ricardo was alone, now the sole spectator of a drama about to unfold. He sat in front of the main monitor in his office, the tablet in hand, watching the screens. The wait would be torturous, but he was ready. The trap was set. Now, it was only a matter of time until Sophia revealed her true face. The parrot, Luro, perched in the living room, let out a low chirp, almost a sigh. Ricardo looked at the bird, feeling a strange connection. Luro had been the voice of truth, and now Ricardo would be the eyes. The next morning arrived with a dense fog hanging over the mansion, as if nature itself sensed the heavy atmosphere that enveloped Ricardo. He went down for coffee, his eyes still heavy with sleeplessness, but with a cold determination he had never felt before. Sophia was already in the kitchen, supervising the maid with the same ease as always, a radiant smile on her face. "Good morning, dear. Auction day has arrived." Her enthusiasm was a stark contrast to Ricardo's silent anguish, who could barely swallow his coffee. "That's good, Sophia," he managed to reply, forcing a smile that barely reached his eyes. "I'm sure it will." While they had breakfast, Ricardo observed Sophia with a new lens. Every movement, every word was analyzed. Alfredo, as usual. Alfredo in a wall clock that Ricardo had brought there the day before, claiming it was a gift so his father wouldn't lose track of time. He could hear the whispers of the technicians, the faint clicks of tools, and every sound amplified his anxiety. The guilt of invading his father's privacy, even if to protect him, was a burden, but the need to know the truth was greater. The kitchen, empty. The hallway, silent. He could see his father's light breathing, his chest rising and falling slowly. Excellent. The afternoon dragged on in a silent eternity. Ricardo remained in his office, his eyes fixed on the main monitor screens, the tablet on his lap. The mansion, once a refuge of luxury and apparent tranquility, now seemed a cage, and he, the jailer and judge of a family drama. With each passing minute, anxiety gnawed at his insides. He alternated between the cameras, the kitchen, impeccably tidy, the hallway deserted, his father's room, where Mr. Alfredo continued to sleep, his breathing soft and regular, a painful reminder of his vulnerability. Guilt was a slow poison. How could he have allowed his father, the man who raised him with so much love and sacrifice, to reach such a point of fragility and isolation under his own roof? Every phrase from Luro echoed in his mind, now amplified by the silent image of his father. "I'm hungry. Didn't eat today." The parrot's words, once irritating, were now the purest and cruelest of truths. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the golden light invaded the room, but Ricardo barely noticed. His attention was entirely focused on the clock, which was approaching 6 in the evening, the time Sophia had promised to return. He could feel his pulse quicken, cold sweat trickling down his neck. Finally, the familiar sound of Sophia's car approached the mansion's entrance. Ricardo froze, his heart beating like a drum. He switched the camera to the main entrance, watching her get out of the vehicle. Impeccable in her gala dress, a victorious smile on her face. She seemed radiant. oblivious to the web of surveillance that enveloped her. "Dear, I'm here. The auction was an absolute success. We raised much more than expected," she announced, entering the room with an air of triumph, her voice melodious and self-satisfied. She didn't even notice Ricardo's tense gaze, who merely nodded, unable to utter a word. "That's good, Sophia," he managed to murmur, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. Sophia continued to chatter about the details of the event, the distinguished guests, the auctioned pieces, as she headed to the kitchen to refresh herself. Ricardo followed her with his eyes through the screens. He watched her open the refrigerator, grab a bottle of water and sip, still talking on the phone with a friend about the party that would follow. "Oh, and the gala dinner will be wonderful. I can't wait to tell you all the details," she said, hanging up the phone with a satisfied sigh. Ricardo watched as Sophia turned to the kitchen counter, where a tray with Mr. Alfredo's dinner was already prepared by the maid. A small plate of thin soup and a piece of bread. The maid, Maria, had already left for the day, leaving everything ready. Sophia picked up the tray, and for an instant, Ricardo felt a pang of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he was wrong. Maybe she was going to take dinner to his father. But the hope vanished as quickly as it appeared. Instead of heading towards the hallway to Mr. Alfredo's room, Sophia stopped. She looked at the tray, then at the trash can under the sink. A cold and calculating smile formed on her lips, a smile Ricardo had never seen before, but which now seemed terrifyingly familiar. With a quick and surreptitious movement, she poured the contents of the soup into the trash. The bread followed the same path. Then she took a napkin, wiped the tray, and placed it back on the counter, as if nothing had happened. The camera, discreetly positioned in the potted plant, captured every detail, every treacherous gesture. The air seemed to thin in Ricardo's lungs. An electric shock ran through his body, followed by a wave of nausea and anger. He squeezed the tablet so hard that his knuckles turned white. There were no more doubts. The truth, cruel and undeniable, was there, recorded, irrefutable. Sophia, oblivious to the horror she had just committed and to the surveillance that unmasked her, hummed a cheerful melody as she left the kitchen, heading to her room to prepare for the gala dinner. "I'm going to get ready for dinner, dear. I won't be long," she called out, her voice full of a false joy that now sounded like a cry of mockery in Ricardo's ears. Ricardo remained motionless, his eyes fixed on the kitchen screen, now empty except for the clean tray. The image of the soup being thrown in the trash repeated in his mind, over and over again. His father, hungry and isolated, while his wife, the woman he loved, deliberately deprived him of food. Luro from the living room let out a sharp chirp, as if sensing the tension in the air. "Didn't eat today." The parrot's hoarse voice echoed, clearer and more painful than ever. Ricardo looked at the bird, his eyes welling up. The voice of truth had spoken, and now the eyes of truth had witnessed. The trap was complete, and the prey revealed. The pain of betrayal was immense, but Ricardo's determination was even greater. He would no longer be blind. He would act. Ricardo felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. The initial shock gave way to a wave of nausea so intense that he had to lean on his office desk to keep from falling. The tablet slipped from his hands, but he held it with a desperate grip, his knuckles white. The image of the soup being poured into the trash, the bread following the same fate, repeated in an infernal loop in his mind. It was real. It was true. Sophia's voice, "I'm going to get ready for dinner, dear. I won't be long," echoed through the mansion, a macabre sound that pierced his soul. How could she be so normal, so cheerful, so carefree after committing an act of such cruelty? The mask had fallen, and the face behind it was monstrous. Luro from the living room let out another chirp, and the phrase, "didn't eat today," resonated, now not as a warning, but as a sentence, a final verdict. Ricardo looked at the parrot, his eyes welling up. The bird, with its animal innocence, had been the only one to see, the only one to speak, while he, the son, the husband, was blind, deaf, and terribly complicit. Guilt crushed him, an unbearable weight. How could he have been so naive? How could he have allowed his father, the man who taught him everything about honor and love, to be treated with such inhumanity under his own roof? Anger began to simmer in his veins, mixed with a stabbing pain. Anger at Sophia for her perfidy. Anger at himself for his blindness. He remembered his father's vague complaints, Sophia's excuses, his own justifications for the old man's weight loss. Everything fit together now, forming a horrifying mosaic of neglect and malice. He needed to act immediately. But how? Confronting her now, while she was preparing for a gala dinner, would be explosive and perhaps reckless. He needed clarity, a plan. Above all, he needed to ensure his father's safety. With his heart beating erratically, Ricardo stood up, his mind in a whirlwind. He needed to see his father. He needed to be sure he was well, or at least as well as he could be after days, perhaps weeks, of deprivation. He left the office, moving like a ghost through the silent mansion. Every step was heavy, every breath an effort. The hallway leading to his father's room seemed longer than ever. Upon reaching the door, he hesitated for a moment, the fear of what he would find squeezing his chest. He opened the door slowly, the soft creak of metal sounding like thunder in the silence. Mr. Alfredo was lying in bed, curled up under the thin blanket, his breathing weak and irregular. His eyes were closed, and his face, marked by age and hunger, seemed even paler and thinner under the faint light coming through the window. The camera's image, once cold proof, now became a painful, palpable reality. Ricardo approached the bed, his heart tight. He knelt beside his father, his hand extended, but without the courage to touch him. The tears, which he had held back so strongly, finally streamed down his face. "Father," he whispered, his voice choked. Forgive me for being so blind." Mr. Alfredo stirred slightly, a faint moan escaping his dry lips. "Water," he murmured, almost inaudible. Ricardo jumped up, guilt transforming into a fierce determination. He ran to the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water and a biscuit he found in the pantry. Something Sophia wouldn't notice was missing. He returned to his father's room, helped him sit up, and offered the water. Mr. Alfredo drank eagerly, his eyes slowly opening, confused. "Son," he asked, his voice hoarse. "Yes, father, it's me. I'm here," Ricardo replied, holding his father's wrinkled hand. "I'm going to take care of you. I promise." He gave the biscuit to his father, who ate it with painful slowness, but with evident gratitude. Ricardo felt a pang of hope, mixed with a cold anger. He could no longer wait. Sophia needed to be confronted, and his father rescued. Back in the office, Ricardo picked up the tablet. The image of the kitchen, now empty, still showed the clean tray, a silent monument to cruelty. He took a deep breath, the pain of betrayal solidifying into an unwavering resolve. The gala dinner would be the last charade he would endure. He would wait, but not for long. The trap was set, the truth revealed. Now, Ricardo prepared for the battle to come, a battle to save his father and unmask the woman he once loved. It was real, it was true. How could she be so normal? He needed to act, immediately. But how? He needed to see his father. "Forgive me." "Yes, father, it's me. I'm going to take care of you, I promise." He gave the biscuit to his father, who ate it with a painful slowness, but with evident gratitude. Ricardo's mind was a whirlwind. The image of his fragile father, murmuring for water, and the sight of Sophia pouring the soup into the trash, mixed in a macabre dance of pain and fury. He needed a plan, and he needed it now. The priority was clear. His father, he couldn't wait. He returned to Mr. Alfredo's room, his heart tight. His father had fallen asleep again, the biscuit almost untouched beside the bed. Ricardo picked it up, broke it into smaller pieces, and delicately placed it in his father's mouth, who chewed slowly, almost by instinct. He brought more water, making sure his father drank as much as possible. "I'll be right back, father," he whispered, stroking his wrinkled forehead. "I'll bring something more substantial." With adrenaline coursing through his veins, Ricardo went downstairs, avoiding making any noise. Sophia was still in her room, probably getting ready for the gala dinner. He could hear the muffled sound of music and the murmur of her voice on the phone. It was the perfect chance. In the kitchen, the clean tray was still on the counter, a silent reminder of Sophia's cruelty. Ricardo opened the refrigerator, his eyes scouring for something that could nourish his father without raising suspicion. He found some plain yogurt, a piece of cheese, and some fruit. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. He prepared a small tray, careful not to leave any trace of his presence. As he went upstairs again, each step seemed to echo through the mansion. He felt like a spy in his own home, a stranger in his own life. The irony was bitter. The man who had built an empire now sneaked around to feed his own father, fearing the woman he had sworn to love. Back in Mr. Alfredo's room, he helped him sit up again. "Father, eat a little more," he said, offering the yogurt. The old man, his eyes still cloudy, accepted the spoon with gratitude. With each spoonful, Ricardo felt a pang of relief and a wave of guilt. Why hadn't he noticed before? How could he have been so blind? While his father ate, Ricardo thought about the next step. He had the recordings, the irrefutable proof, but how to use them? Confronting Sophia directly now before dinner would be a disaster. She was cunning, manipulative. He needed a plan that would unmask her undeniably, perhaps even publicly, the gala dinner. The idea began to form in his mind, a social event full of influential people, the perfect stage for the truth to come out. But first, he needed to ensure his father's safety. He couldn't leave him alone and vulnerable. "Father, I need you to be strong," Ricardo said, holding the old man's hand. "I'm going to fix everything, but I need you to trust me. Please, try to eat and drink as much as you can when I bring it. Don't say anything to Sophia, please." Mr. Alfredo looked at him, a spark of understanding in his tired eyes. He nodded weakly. "I trust you, my son." His voice was a hoarse whisper. Ricardo felt a lump in his throat. That man, his father, had been subjected to such cruelty, and yet his faith in him remained intact. He made his father more comfortable and returned to his office. He picked up the tablet and transferred the recordings to an external storage device, ensuring he had a secure copy. He also sent a copy to his trusted lawyer with instructions to open it only in case of a specific emergency or if he didn't make contact. He couldn't take risks. The clock showed 7:30. The gala dinner would begin in less than an hour. Sophia would soon be ready. He needed to compose himself, don the mask of a loving husband, and wait for the right moment. He looked at himself in the office mirror. His eyes were red, his face tense. He needed to look normal. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the trembling in his hands. The anger still simmered, but now it was contained, cold, calculating. "Dear, are you ready? The car is already waiting." Sophia's voice echoed from the living room, melodious and impatient. Ricardo closed his eyes for an instant. The charade was beginning. He was an actor in his own tragedy. "I'm coming down, Sophia," he replied, his voice surprisingly firm. As he went downstairs, he saw Sophia in the entrance hall. She was stunning in a midnight blue silk dress, jewels sparkling at her neck and wrists. A perfect smile adorned her lips. She seemed the personification of elegance and happiness. "Finally, you took your time," she said with a slight tone of reproach, but without losing her smile. "Come on, we can't be late." She approached, took his arm, and kissed him lightly on the cheek. Ricardo felt a shiver of revulsion. The scent of her perfume, once so pleasant, now seemed suffocating. He forced a smile, a tight knot in his stomach. "Yes, let's go," he murmured, allowing her to guide him out of the mansion to the car that awaited them. As the driver took them down the lit driveway, Sophia chattered about the auction, the guests, the anticipation of dinner. Ricardo merely nodded, his thoughts far away, trapped in the image of his starving father and the recording that was now secure. He was going to war, and Sophia, oblivious, was going to a party. The night would be long, but he knew that dawn would bring the truth. The battle had begun. The ride in the luxury car seemed endless. Sophia, beside him, continued to chatter about the details of the gala dinner, the guest list, the importance of the charity auction, the potential business deals that could arise. Her voice, once a balm, now sounded like an annoying hum, a discordant melody that Ricardo could barely process. He nodded mechanically, forcing empty smiles, while her every word pierced his soul, exposing the abyssal disconnect between facade and reality. The scent of Sophia's perfume, a floral and sweet mixture he once associated with love, now evoked nausea. He felt the weight of her hand on his arm, a touch that was once comforting, but now felt like a shackle. The repulsion was almost palpable, and he struggled to keep it contained, so that no muscle in his face betrayed the storm raging within him. The image of his father, fragile and hungry, murmuring for water, superimposed itself on Sophia's, dazzling and oblivious. The juxtaposition was cruel, a constant reminder of her perfidy and his own blindness. "I'm hungry," Luro's voice echoed in his mind, an accusing ghost that spurred him on. "Didn't eat today." "Ricardo, are you listening to me?" Sophia asked, a slight tone of impatience in her voice. "You seem to be in another world." He blinked, forcing himself back to the present reality. "Sorry, dear. Just thinking about the auction details. It's an important event, isn't it?" He managed a convincing smile, or at least he hoped so. Sophia smiled, satisfied. "Exactly. We need to make a good impression. Mr. Almeida will be there, and he's interested in that merger project. It's our chance." She squeezed his arm, and Ricardo felt a shiver of disgust. The car glided down the lit driveway, revealing the grandeur of the event hall. Lights sparkled, luxury cars lined up, and an elegant crowd gathered at the entrance. The soft music of a string quartet floated in the air, mixing with the murmur of conversations. It was a spectacle of opulence and superficiality, the perfect setting for the charade he was about to dismantle. As he got out of the car, Ricardo felt the weight of Sophia's gaze on him. He adjusted his jacket, took a deep breath, and put on his mask. The successful husband, the loving man, the perfect host. He was an actor, and the stage was set. "Dear, you look impeccable," Sophia whispered, adjusting his lapel. "Come on, the hosts must be waiting for us." They entered the hall, and Ricardo was immediately swallowed by the crowd. Familiar faces, forced smiles, empty handshakes. He greeted, smiled, exchanged pleasantries, but his mind was elsewhere. His eyes scanned the room, looking for a face, an opportunity, a foothold for his plan. He spotted Mr. Almeida, the businessman Sophia had mentioned, talking to a group near the cocktail table. He also saw Dr. Mendez, a renowned doctor in the city, known for his unwavering ethics and social influence. The presence of people like Dr. Mendez was crucial. The truth needed to be heard by ears that could give it weight and credibility. Sophia pulled him towards Mr. Almeida's group. "Ricardo, dear, look who's here," she exclaimed, her voice full of forced enthusiasm. As Sophia launched into an animated conversation about business and philanthropy, Ricardo stepped away slightly, grabbing a glass of champagne. The bubbly liquid tasted bitter in his mouth. He felt Sophia's gaze on him, a subtle but constant vigilance. She couldn't suspect anything, not yet. He needed a moment, a clear plan. The recording was safe, the copy with the lawyer. But how to present it? How would the explosion be most devastating for Sophia and most effective for his father? Public humiliation was an option, but he needed to be sure that the truth would be unquestionable, that Sophia would have nowhere to run. His eyes met Dr. Mendez's again. The doctor was alone for a moment, observing the crowd with a thoughtful expression. An idea began to form in Ricardo's mind, cold and calculating. He needed a medical witness, someone who could attest to his father's condition, who could give scientific weight to his accusation. The night would be long. The music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. Everything was a smokescreen for the battle that was about to begin. Ricardo tightened his grip on the glass in his hand, contained anger simmering beneath the surface. He was ready. The trap was set, and the prey, unknowingly, danced at her own feast. Sophia, oblivious to the brewing storm, continued to shine, her laughter echoing through the hall as she greeted a couple of businessmen. "Darlings, so good to see you. This year's auction promises to be spectacular. Don't you think?" She turned to Ricardo, a forced smile on her lips. "Ricardo, aren't you going to greet our friends?" He approached, extending his hand with a firm handshake and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good evening. It's always a pleasure." The words came out mechanically, almost effortlessly. He was a master in the art of dissimulation, a talent he now used against the woman who had taught him to be so. As Sophia got lost in conversations about investments and social projects, Ricardo allowed himself to observe. That world of wealth and appearances, which he had built with so much effort, now seemed a grotesque stage. Every smile, every gesture of false cordiality was a reminder of the hypocrisy that surrounded him. And at the center of it all, his wife, the personification of veiled cruelty. His eyes met Dr. Mendez's again. The doctor, a middle-aged man with a dignified posture and a shrewd gaze, was now in a more intimate conversation with one of the event organizers. Ricardo knew he needed to act with caution. A direct approach would be suspicious. "Ricardo, you're so quiet today," Sophia commented, turning to him with an arched eyebrow. "Is something bothering you?" He forced a sigh, a carefully rehearsed expression of concern. "It's Dad, Sophia. He hasn't been very well lately. Age takes its toll, you know. Sometimes I worry he's not getting the attention he needs." He cast a significant glance at her, which she ignored, busy adjusting a strand of hair. "Oh, Ricardo, he's a strong man. And we have the nurse, don't worry so much. Tonight is a night to celebrate, not to fret over old age," she said with a dismissive tone that made Ricardo's blood boil. Her indifference was a punch to the gut. "Perhaps you're right," he murmured, "but still. I'd like a second opinion. His nurse is excellent, but an opinion from a specialist like yourself would be invaluable." Bah! He left the sentence hanging, hoping she wouldn't notice the veiled intention. Sophia merely shrugged, already turning to wave at someone else. "Do as you wish, dear, but don't spoil the night with your worries. Mr. Almeida is coming this way." It was the perfect cue. Ricardo, with a discreet nod, began to move away from the group, heading with a calculated purpose towards Dr. Mendez. He needed a pretext, something that would sound natural. He waited for the moment when Dr. Mendez said goodbye to the organizer, standing alone for an instant. Ricardo approached, with an expression of slight apprehension. "Dr. Mendez, good evening. Ricardo Albuquerque." He extended his hand, his grip firm. "Excuse me for bothering you, but I saw you and couldn't help but come over." The doctor smiled cordially. Mr. Albuquerque, the pleasure is mine. Always a pleasure to see you at our events. Thank you. Actually, Dr. Mendez, I'd like to ask you for some advice if it's not too much trouble. It's about my father, Mr. Alfredo. He hasn't been very well lately, and I confess I'm quite worried. He's at an advanced age, and I feel he might need a more in-depth evaluation. His nurse is excellent, but an opinion from a specialist like yourself would be invaluable. Ricardo kept his tone calm, almost casual, but his eyes conveyed the urgency he felt. He knew Dr. Mendez was a man of integrity, and that the mention of a vulnerable elder would capture his attention. Dr. Mendez frowned slightly, his expression turning more serious. I understand, Mr. Albuquerque. The health of our parents is always a priority. What is the nature of your concern? He's been very weak, Dr. Mendez. Loss of appetite, occasional disorientation. I've tried everything, but I feel he's wasting away. I was wondering if you could perhaps make a home visit at a convenient time. I would be very grateful. The doctor pondered for a moment. Of course, Mr. Albuquerque. I can fit a visit into my schedule. How about tomorrow morning? I can stop by your residence around 10, if that's suitable. Cold relief washed over Ricardo. It was perfect. Tomorrow morning, Sophia would be out, probably at a meeting or social engagement. He would have the necessary time for Dr. Mendez to examine his father without interference. That would be excellent, Dr. Mendez. Thank you very much. It's a weight off my mind. Ricardo smiled, a genuine smile this time, though tinged with bitter satisfaction. You're welcome. It's my job. And the health of our elders is a cause very dear to me, the doctor replied, with an understanding look. Ricardo said goodbye, feeling a new surge of energy. The first step was taken. Dr. Mendez would be the impartial witness, the voice of reason and science. With him, the truth about his father's condition would be undeniable. He returned to Sophia, who was now laughing loudly with Mr. Almeida. She didn't even notice his brief absence. Ricardo picked up another glass of champagne, feeling the weight of the recording in his pocket, the irrefutable proof. The trap was almost complete. Tomorrow, Sophia's charade would begin to crumble. The night in the event hall dragged on, a symphony of falsehood and ambition. Ricardo, with a glass of champagne in hand, watched Sophia. She was the personification of that world, a woman who danced with grace on the surface, ignoring the dark depths she herself had created. Her laughter, once a sound that enchanted him, now sounded hollow, an echo of the cruelty that hid behind her perfect smile. Ricardo, dear, Mr. Almeida is impressed with your vision for the project, Sophia said, turning to him with a sparkle in her eyes. You are so brilliant. He forced a smile, feeling the poison of her words. Just doing my job, Sophia, as always. The conversation continued for some time, about investments, philanthropy, and the next vacation trip they planned to take. Ricardo participated, an automaton, his answers polished and empty. Every handshake, every exchanged smile was another step in the charade he was about to dismantle. He felt the weight of the recording in his pocket, the silent proof awaiting the moment to explode. Finally, the party began to thin out. Sophia, exhausted but satisfied with the evening's networking, bid farewell to the last guests with impeccable charm. In the car, the silence was heavy, broken only by the soft hum of the vehicle. It was a success, don't you think, Ricardo? Sophia commented, leaning back in the leather seat. We managed to close some important contacts. Mr. Almeida seemed very receptive. Yes, Sophia, a success, he replied, his voice monotonous. He looked out the window, the city lights passing quickly. The grandeur of the mansion seemed even more oppressive as they approached. Upon arriving, the house was silent, except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Ricardo felt a shiver, There, within those luxurious walls, his father was wasting away. He went upstairs, his mind already on the next day. "I'll check on Dad," he said, more to himself than to Sophia. "Don't worry, Ricardo, the nurse is there. He's fine," she replied, already heading to their bedroom. "I'm exhausted. Good night." Ricardo nodded, without turning. He walked to his father's bedroom door, hesitating. He couldn't go in, not now. Sophia was nearby, and any suspicious movement could alert her. He merely pressed his ear to the door, listening to the old man's weak and irregular breathing. A pang of pain shot through his chest. "Hold on, father," he whispered. "Tomorrow." He went to his own room, but sleep didn't come. He lay down, staring at the ceiling, going over every detail of his plan. Dr. Mendes would come at 10. Sophia would have left for her Pilates class, and then for a business lunch. Time was crucial. He needed to ensure his father was alone with the doctor, without the shadow of Sophia or the complicit nurse. At dawn, Ricardo got up before the sun. Nervousness was a knot in his stomach. He went down to the kitchen, preparing strong coffee. The parrot, still sleeping in its covered cage, was the only silent witness to his anguish. Sophia came down shortly after, already dressed for the gym, in her impeccable gym attire. "Good morning, dear. You look like you didn't sleep. Don't worry so much about Dad. He's strong." "Just a little anxious about work," he lied, forcing a smile. "I have an important meeting today." "Ah, yes, me too. Pilates, then lunch with the girls. Don't wait for me for lunch. And don't forget we have dinner with the Almeidas tonight." She kissed his forehead, a cold and routine gesture. "See you later." Ricardo watched her leave, the sound of her car driving away down the driveway. The clock on the wall showed 8:30 a.m., an hour and a half. He took a deep breath, feeling his heart quicken. He went upstairs, determined. The nurse, Mrs. Lucia, was in the kitchen preparing breakfast. "Mrs. Lucia, good morning," Ricardo said, with a firm tone that made her startle. "Dr. Mendes will visit my father today at 10. I would like Mr. Alfredo to be ready for the examination. And please, prepare his breakfast, but don't serve it yet. Dr. Mendes might want to examine him first." The nurse, visibly surprised, nodded. "Yes, Mr. Ricardo, as you wish." Ricardo knew the nurse was part of the problem, but he needed her to prepare his father. He went to Alfredo's room, opened the door, and entered. The room was dark, the air heavy. His father was lying down, a fragile, shrunken figure in the bed. "Father?" Ricardo called, his voice choked. He approached the bed, sitting on the edge. "It's me, Ricardo. You're going to have a visit today. A very good doctor will come to see you." Alfredo slowly opened his eyes, a glimmer of confusion and weariness in them. "Doctor?" he murmured, his voice weak. "Yes, father. He's going to take care of you." "Everything will be fine," Ricardo assured, holding his father's cold, wrinkled hand. He felt a wave of love and guilt. "I promise." The clock ticked on, each minute an eternity. Ricardo sat in the living room, the recording still in his pocket, his heart pounding. At 9:55 a.m., the intercom rang. "Dr. Mendes," the voice from the intercom announced. Ricardo felt a shiver run down his spine. It was time. The trap was set, and the truth was about to be revealed. Ricardo ran to the door, his heart hammering in his chest. He opened it with a contained urgency, revealing Dr. Mendes, impeccable in his suit, with a leather briefcase in his hand. "Dr. Mendes, thank you very much for coming," Ricardo said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, but the barely perceptible tremor in his voice did not go unnoticed by the doctor. "Mr. Albuquerque." "No problem," Dr. Mendes replied, his gaze assessing the tension on Ricardo's face. "Where is Mr. Alfredo?" "This way, please," Ricardo indicated, guiding the doctor through the living room and up the stairs. He gestured for Dr. Mendes to wait a moment before entering the room. "My father is quite weak, Dr. Mendes. The nurse is in the kitchen, but I would like you to examine him without interruptions if possible. The doctor nodded, understanding the nuance. Ricardo opened the door to Alfredo's room, which was still in semi-darkness. The heavy curtains blocked the morning light, and the air seemed stagnant. Alfredo was in bed, an almost invisible figure under the sheet, his eyes closed. "Father, Dr. Mendez has come to see you," Ricardo said softly, turning on a discreet light. Alfredo slowly opened his eyes, blinking against the faint light. His gaze was vague, but he attempted a weak smile upon seeing his son. Dr. Mendez approached the bed, his expression turning serious as he observed the patient. He took his stethoscope from his briefcase and began the examination with careful and professional movements. Ricardo watched every gesture, every expression on the doctor's face, looking for any clue. The silence in the room was broken only by Alfredo's shallow breathing and the sounds of the medical examination. Dr. Mendez checked his skin, his eyes, listened to his heart and lungs. With each touch, each observation, the doctor's brow furrowed a little more. He took Alfredo's hand, feeling the temperature and texture of his skin. "Mr. Albuquerque," Dr. Mendez began, his voice low and serious, "your father is extremely dehydrated and showing clear signs of severe malnutrition. His muscles are atrophied, his skin is dry and lacks elasticity. There is pronounced paleness in the mucous membranes." He picked up a small reflex hammer, testing Alfredo's knees. His reflexes are slow. He appears to be in a state of deep lethargy. The doctor's words were a punch to the gut, confirming his worst fears. "Has he been eating well, Dr. Mendez?" Ricardo asked, though he already knew the answer. Dr. Mendez looked at Ricardo, his eyes heavy with concern. "From what I see, Mr. Albuquerque, no. There are no signs of adequate nutrition for quite some time. The weight loss is significant." He paused, and then his voice became more incisive. "What is his eating routine? Who is responsible for his meals?" At that exact moment, a sharp and familiar sound echoed from downstairs. It was the Parrot, with its shrill and unmistakable voice. "I'm hungry. Didn't eat today." The phrase cut through the air, clear and disturbing. Dr. Mendez raised an eyebrow, looking at Ricardo with an expression that mixed surprise with a sudden, grim understanding. It was the missing proof, the innocent voice that confirmed the cruelty. "That's the house parrot, Dr. Mendez," Ricardo explained, his voice tense. He repeats what he hears." The doctor said nothing, but his gaze deepened. He returned to examining Alfredo, now with even more meticulous attention, as if looking for more evidence of neglect. He opened Alfredo's mouth, examining his tongue and gums. "Mr. Albuquerque, your father's condition is serious. He needs immediate hospitalization. We need to reverse this dehydration and malnutrition. It's not just a matter of advanced age, it's a matter of basic care that is not being provided." Dr. Mendez's tone was now one of veiled condemnation. "He is at risk." Anger simmered in Ricardo, mixed with a stabbing pain. The parrot's voice, the doctor's confirmation, his father's fragile image, everything fit into a picture of horror. "I understand, Dr. Mendez," Ricardo said, his voice hoarse with emotion. He looked at his father, who now seemed to have fallen asleep again, oblivious to the gravity of the situation. "I will arrange everything, and I guarantee that whoever did this to him will pay." Dr. Mendez nodded, putting away his instruments. "I will prepare the papers for hospitalization and contact the hospital. We need to act fast." He looked at Ricardo, his gaze conveying a mixture of solidarity and professional concern. "Mr. Albuquerque, the situation is more serious than a simple concern. There are clear indications of severe neglect here." Ricardo merely nodded, his jaw clenched. The trap was complete. The truth, cruel and undeniable, had been revealed. Now, it was time to confront the charade, the cruelty. The image of his father slowly wasting away under the same roof as him was an open wound in his soul. He accompanied Dr. Mendez to the door, his mind in a whirlwind of anger and guilt. "Dr. Mendez, please expedite everything possible. I myself will take my father to the hospital if necessary. I don't want the nurse or anyone else to interfere." Ricardo's voice was a hoarse whisper, but laden with an authority that the doctor recognized. "I understand, Mr. Albuquerque. I will make the contacts immediately. A specialized ambulance will be ideal, given his condition. I will keep you informed." Dr. Mendez handed Ricardo a card with his direct number. "Anything, don't hesitate to call." Ricardo nodded, closing the door. The silence of the mansion now seemed an echo of his own misfortune. He went upstairs with each step, feeling the weight of guilt and anger. Mrs. Lucia was in the kitchen, oblivious to the storm brewing. Ricardo found her, his face a mask of coldness. "Mrs. Lucia, my father will be hospitalized today. Dr. Mendez is already arranging everything. It is not necessary to prepare any more meals for him here. Just pack his essential belongings for hospitalization." The nurse paled. "Hospitalized? But he wasn't that bad, Mr. Ricardo." "Mrs. Sophia said." "Mrs. Sophia is not here now," Ricardo interrupted her, his voice cutting. "And Dr. Mendez diagnosed severe malnutrition and dehydration. He is at risk of death. I don't want you to approach him except to help him get dressed, under my supervision, understood?" Mrs. Lucia swallowed hard, her eyes wide. "Yes, Mr. Ricardo. Understood." She looked like a statue, fear etched on her face. Ricardo knew she was an accomplice, but the priority now was his father. Her time would come. He returned to Alfredo's room. His father was paler than ever, his breathing weak. Ricardo sat beside him, taking his hand. "Father, you're going to the hospital. You'll be fine, I promise. I'll take care of everything." Tears streamed down Ricardo's face, a mixture of relief at having discovered the truth and an excruciating pain for having waited so long. Ricardo's phone rang. It was Dr. Mendez. The ambulance would be there in an hour. Ricardo instructed Mrs. Lucia to prepare a small bag with his father's personal hygiene items and some comfortable clothes. He himself helped Alfredo sit up, supporting him carefully. The old man's weakness was palpable, and Ricardo felt a tight knot in his heart. While waiting for the ambulance, Ricardo called his lawyer, Dr. Carvalho. "Dr. Carvalho, I need an emergency meeting. I have evidence of severe neglect and mistreatment against my father. I need a restraining order and immediate divorce." He briefly narrated the facts, including the doctor's diagnosis and the Parrot witness. The lawyer, shocked, promised to act with the utmost urgency. The ambulance arrived punctually. Ricardo insisted on accompanying his father, holding his hand throughout the journey. At the hospital, Alfredo was immediately taken to the emergency room, where a medical team was already waiting for him. Ricardo watched as the nurses and doctors worked, connecting IVs, monitoring vital signs. Dr. Mendez was there, supervising everything. "He's going to be fine, Mr. Albuquerque, but the road will be long. We need to reverse the malnutrition and strengthen his body." Ricardo nodded, grateful. "Thank you, Dr. Mendez. Thank you very much for everything." Back at the mansion, the clock showed 6 p.m. Sophia would be back soon. Ricardo sat in the living room, the Parrot's recording in his pocket, his cell phone ready to record her reaction. The dinner with the Almeidas. It would be the perfect stage for his revenge. He felt a chill down his spine, but it wasn't fear. It was the coldness of determination, the sound of Sophia's car on the driveway. The door opened. "Dear, I'm home. Dinner with the Almeidas is at 8. Don't forget. How was your day and Dad?" Her voice was light, carefree, the perfect mask of a devoted wife. Ricardo stood up, his face expressionless. My day was revealing, Sophia. And Dad? Dad is in the hospital. Sophia stopped in the middle of the room, her smile frozen. In the hospital? But why? What happened? There was a note of panic in her voice, but Ricardo knew it was just the fear of being discovered. What happened is that he was starving to death, Sophia, dehydrated and malnourished according to Dr. Mendez. And I know exactly who was responsible. Ricardo took his cell phone from his pocket, his eyes fixed on hers. Ricardo watched Sophia's smile crumble, the mask of a devoted wife cracking under the weight of the truth. Her eyes, once full of false concern, now shone with growing panic. In the hospital? But why? What happened? She repeated, her voice sharper, her attempt at innocence failing miserably. I always took care of him. He's a stubborn old man, Ricardo, who doesn't want to eat. You know how difficult he is. Ricardo raised an eyebrow, the coldness in his gaze cutting through the air. Don't try to fool me, Sophia. Not anymore. Dr. Mendez was clear. Severe malnutrition and dehydration. And it's not out of stubbornness, it's out of deprivation. Sophia took a step back, her hands clenching. Deprivation? That's absurd. I myself ensure that Mrs. Lucia feeds him. I supervise everything. What are you accusing me of, Ricardo? Of neglect? After everything I do for you and your father? Her voice rose, trying to play the victim, an old tactic that Ricardo now saw with crystal clarity. I'm accusing you of cruelty, Sophia, of slow torture, of throwing food in the trash while my father wasted away from hunger under the same roof as us, Ricardo retorted, each word a precise blow. He took his cell phone from his pocket, the screen lit and played the recording. The sharp and unmistakable sound of the Parrot filled the room, echoing off the mansion walls. I'm hungry, didn't eat today. I'm hungry, didn't eat today. The shrill voice, repeating the phrases with a disturbing clarity, was irrefutable testimony. Sophia's face paled, the blood draining from her features. Her eyes widened in pure terror, fixed on the cell phone in Ricardo's hand. The charade had collapsed. The mask fell completely, revealing the cold and calculating woman behind it. This is a trick, a setup. The Parrot. He repeats anything. You're crazy, Ricardo. You're accusing me based on a stupid bird. She stammered, her voice trembling, but still desperately trying to defend herself. Stupid, Sophia. He's the only loyal witness my father had, and Dr. Mendez confirmed every word he repeated. He saw the signs of malnutrition, of dehydration. He saw the muscle atrophy, the pallor. He saw what you did, Ricardo said, his voice low but laden with a contained fury that made Sophia recoil even further. And that's not all. I have other evidence. I set a trap, Sophia, and you fell into it like a rat. Sophia's hands went to her mouth, her eyes wide. She looked around as if looking for an exit, an escape. No, it's not true. You're making things up. I would never do that. I love your father. I love you. No, Sophia, you love no one but yourself and my money, Ricardo corrected her, his voice hard as stone. I've already called Dr. Carvalho. He's preparing the divorce papers, and it won't be an amicable divorce. It will be for severe neglect, mistreatment, and attempted murder. You will lose everything, Sophia. Everything. The mention of the lawyer and the legal accusations finally broke the last shred of her composure. A sharp cry escaped her throat, a mixture of rage and despair. No, you can't do this. I'm your wife. I have rights. I'll destroy you, Ricardo. I'll take half of everything. You won't take anything, Sophia. Not after I present the evidence of how you treated my father. And don't worry about dinner with the Almeidas. It's still on. In fact, it will be the perfect stage for your grand finale. You'll have the chance to explain to them and to everyone what you did, or I'll do it for you. Sophia staggered, her face contorted in a mix of hatred and dread. She tried to advance, her nails extended, but Ricardo intercepted her with a gaze that paralyzed her. "Don't you dare touch me! Don't you dare go near my father! Your charade is over, Sophia. And now, you will pay for every day of hunger he endured." The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by Sophia's gasping breaths. The mansion, once a symbol of his life of luxury and power, now seemed a prison, and the hunt, finally, had come to an end. Ricardo felt an emptiness in his chest, the pain of betrayal mixed with the bitter satisfaction of impending justice. He had rescued his father. Now, it was time to bring down the cruel queen. Sophia, her face contorted in a mask of hatred and dread, recoiled another step, stumbling slightly on a Persian rug. Her eyes, once so calculating, now shone with uncontrolled terror. "You can't do this. I'm your wife. I have rights. I'll take half of everything." Her voice was a sharp lament, but Ricardo no longer saw the woman he loved, only the cornered predator. "No, Sophia, you won't get anything. He's still standing, or I'll do it for you." Ricardo kept his voice low, but each word was a hammer hitting Sophia's last wall of defense. She staggered, her face pale and sweaty. She tried to advance, her nails extended, a last, desperate gesture of attack, but Ricardo intercepted her with a gaze that paralyzed her. "Your charade is over, Sophia." Sophia's body trembled uncontrollably. Rage turned into despair, and despair into convulsive, tearless crying, just dry sobs that shook her body. She fell onto the sofa, her face buried in her hands, the image of her complete defeat. The woman who had manipulated and tormented an elderly man for months was now just a heap of ruins. Ricardo felt no pity, only a deep weariness and the certainty that he was doing the right thing. He picked up his cell phone and called Dr. Carvalho again. "Dr. Carvalho, the situation has escalated. Sophia is aware of everything. I need the restraining order to be issued immediately. She cannot have access to the mansion or any assets until the divorce is finalized. And please, prepare a team to come here and ensure she leaves." As Ricardo spoke, Sophia raised her head, her eyes swollen and red. You can't kick me out of my own house. I have rights to this house." "This is not your house, Sophia. It's my house and my father's, and you lost all your rights the moment you decided his life was worth nothing," Ricardo replied, without looking away from his phone. "Dr. Carvalho, I'm waiting. Yes, as soon as possible." About 30 minutes later, a team from Dr. Carvalho's office, accompanied by 2 discreet security guards, arrived at the mansion. Ricardo received them at the door, indicating the room where Sophia was still sitting in shock. "Mrs. Sophia, we have a court order for restriction and eviction. Please gather your essential belongings." "You have 1 hour," said one of the lawyers, with a formal and impersonal voice. Sophia looked at them, then at Ricardo, her eyes filled with icy hatred. "You'll regret this, Ricardo. I swear you'll regret it." Ricardo merely watched her, impassive. "I've regretted many things, Sophia, but having discovered the truth and saved my father is not one of them." While Sophia, under the team's supervision, collected some clothes and personal items, Ricardo went up to his father's room. The silence there was different now, no longer oppressive, but hopeful. He looked at the empty bed, imagining Alfredo in the hospital, receiving the care he deserved. The parrot in the corner of the living room was quiet, as if sensing the change in the atmosphere. Later, with Sophia already out of the mansion and the restraining order in effect, Ricardo sat down again in the living room, exhausted, but with a weight off his heart. The house seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. He picked up the phone and called the hospital. "Dr. Mendez, how is my father?" "Mr. Albuquerque, he is stable, still weak, but his vital signs are improving. He has started to accept liquids and some pureed food. The road is long, but he is strong. He will recover." Ricardo closed his eyes, feeling warm tears stream down. They were not tears of pain, but of relief and gratitude. Thank you, Dr. Mendes. Thank you very much for everything. Dinner with the Almeidas was cancelled, replaced by a brief note from Ricardo citing an urgent family matter. The truth would come out in due time, but it would not be at a social dinner. It would be in the courts where Sophia would face the consequences of her cruelty. Ricardo looked at the parrot, who now watched him with its intelligent eyes. "I'm hungry," the bird repeated in a softer tone. "Not any more, my friend," Ricardo murmured with a sad smile. "No one else will go hungry in this house." The mansion, once a stage of secrets and suffering, was beginning to heal. Ricardo knew the journey would be long, both for his father and for himself, to rebuild trust and peace. But the darkness had been exposed, the truth had prevailed, and finally, justice was on its way. The millionaire, blinded by routine, had awakened, and with him, the hope for a new beginning for Alfredo and for himself.